They called me useless at our own family barbecue. 2 hours later, they needed my name to access the CIA. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the backyard was the smell of burning meat and old grievances. It was Memorial Day, and the sun blazed over a row of plastic lawn chairs and too many tiny American flags stuck into the grass like declarations of loyalty no one in that yard truly felt. I hadn't been back here in over a year. Not since before deployment. Not since I buried pieces of myself in sand I still couldn't get out of my boots. No one looked up when I entered. Not even Madison. She was busy pouring iced tea into tall glasses, her new bob haircut swaying like she was in some political commercial. Marcia Mom offered me a weak smile from behind the grill station she didn't know how to use. Gregory, of course, stood tall with his arms crossed like he was monitoring troop positions, not hot dogs. I took the paper plate someone shoved into my hand and moved toward the edge of the gathering where the folding table trembled under a tray of overcooked corn. I wasn't really hungry. Evelyn made it, someone mumbled from the crowd. That was it. No hug, no questions. Not even a how have you been, just Evelyn made it. I sat in the shade beneath the old dogwood tree that had lost half its leaves, pretending not to watch Madison working the room. She was the reason for the gathering, after all, our golden girl. The one who had everything going for her beauty ambition, a freshly pressed folder of letters from the CIA. Gregory raised his beer can, the aluminum catching sunlight like a sword. "Here's to Madison," he announced. "First Drake to be tapped by the agency. Smart, disciplined, driven." He turned toward me just slightly, barely even moving his head. Unlike some of us who came back without direction. Laughter. Small, controlled, but it cut deeper than shrapnel. I didn't flinch. Marcia didn't say anything. She never did when Gregory went in like that. Just smoothed her napkin and kept slicing buns. Madison twirled a fork in her fingers and smirked. "At least I'm moving forward," she added casually, like it didn't have the weight of a dagger. I watched her carefully. That smile was too careful. And then, as she reached into her tote bag to pull out her sunglasses, a manila envelope slipped out and dropped near my feet. I bent down and caught the words, "Security clearance, federal access application," before she scrambled to snatch it back. I blinked. My own name stared back at me from the bottom of the form. Evelyn M. Drake, clearance sponsor. Sponsor. It hit me like a delayed punch to the ribs. She didn't get this far on her own. They used me, my name, my record, my sacrifices, all the while calling me nothing. I stood up slowly. No one noticed. Not yet. The world around me blurred, the barbecue smells, the flags, the sun. All faded behind the roar inside my chest. I needed air. Not because I couldn't breathe, but because I needed to breathe on my own terms, not theirs. I walked around the side of the house, following the hedge line, my hands shaking but my spine straight. Evelyn Madison's voice cracked behind me. I didn't turn. She caught up to me near the fence, her expression panicked no longer. The cool recruit. "I need your signature," she said, voice low but urgent. "Without it, I can't clear the background check. They flagged something and they need your verification. It's just a formality, just like I was a formality in their lives. The quiet daughter, the placeholder, the signature." I took the document from her, unfolding it like I had all the time in the world. My name was printed in bold black ink, an echo of every sacrifice I'd made in silence. She waited, bouncing slightly on her feet, suddenly unsure of her footing. I looked her in the eye, fold the form slowly. "You called me useless. Now you need me." I walked away. My silence echoed louder than their laughter. I didn't speak during the drive home. I didn't play music, didn't open the windows, didn't even unbutton the collar of the dress shirt still sticking to my skin with old sweat and fresh resentment. The soft hum of my engine through Northern Virginia suburbs was the only sound until I parked in the cramped lot behind my apartment and sat there for 10 long minutes staring out the windshield like something would shift. It didn't. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, unlocked my door, and was met by the stale quiet of home. A half-wilted plant drooped near the window. The AC unit kicked on with a rattle. Mail was still scattered on the counter, unopened since last week. Or maybe longer. I dropped the envelope Madison had handed me, no weaponized at me on the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The hum of the fan picked up. I typed faster than I was thinking. CIA clearance process sponsor misuse. A dozen results popped up: forums, PDF documents, a couple of old legal cases buried in government archives. My eyes narrowed. Turns out using someone's active security clearance credentials without explicit authorization wasn't just unethical, it could be criminal. Especially if it crossed into misrepresentation or forged consent. I clicked link after link, then paused at a line that made the back of my neck prickle. Failure to report knowledge of unauthorized clearance use may result in co-liability under federal law. So if I stayed quiet, I wasn't just being used, I was complicit. I grabbed my phone. Jasmine Reed was listed in my contacts under JR Shield Team. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, but she had once been the only attorney willing to talk to anyone inside our old unit when the brass had tried to silence a report about civilian casualties in Kandahar. She picked up after the second ring. Evelyn, her voice hadn't changed. Low, clear, with the edge of someone who knew too much and was tired of pretending otherwise. Hey, I said. I think I have a clearance problem. My sister submitted something with my name. She's applying for CIA intake. A pause. Then, is your consent documented? No. You may be liable if you let it slide. Just like that. Flat. No room to squirm. I ran a hand through my hair eyes, flicking to the manila envelope still sitting on my table like a threat that hadn't detonated yet. They've always used what they needed. I guess I didn't think it mattered anymore. It does. Evelyn, this isn't some HR paperwork. Your clearance is tied to deployments, trauma assessments, classified zones. If she referenced your name or your history for access without your sign-off, that's identity misuse under Title 18. My phone buzzed. A text. Madison, I didn't know it would be a big deal. Please just sign. I'll owe you. I stared at it, jaw clenched. I didn't reply. Jasmine's voice softened just barely. You're not obligated to protect people who violate federal boundaries, family or not. I need to know exactly what she accessed. I can help. But we'll have to be surgical about it. Can you still access your 2014 logs? I think so. My external drive's buried somewhere under boxes. I haven't touched that data in years. Pull it. If her submission matches anything in your logs, we can build a case. I'll meet you in person tomorrow. But Evelyn, if you want to move forward, I need access to everything. And we go dark, no family contact. In their eyes, I had disappeared until I became useful again. The silence in my apartment had taken on a different weight. Not emptiness, but anticipation. The kind you get right before a storm hits, the stillness where you know the wind is about to rip everything loose. I was starting to recognize that silence wasn't absence, it was cover. And I'd been under it far too long. Jasmine sat across from me at the makeshift workstation she'd set up in my dining area laptop. Open sleeves, rolled eyes sharp behind smudged glasses. She didn't need to ask if I'd slept. The stack of unopened boxes and the coffee rings on the table answered that for her. I was digging through a bin marked 2014 Q4, pulling out an old external hard drive I hadn't touched in nearly a decade. I remembered the file I was looking for barely. Gregory had said it was tax-related. Harmless. I'd signed it in the kitchen during Thanksgiving prep while he stirred gravy and avoided eye contact. There was a spreadsheet I said plugging in the drive. He said it was just for deductions. Something about veterans' incentives. Jasmine's fingers moved fast on her keyboard. Veterans' incentives can be real, but they're often misused, especially when paired with federal grants. A ping. The file opened. And there it was, my name clearance ID attached to a Department of Energy grant proposal. Not signed by me, not even formatted in my writing style, but still. There. Jasmine tilted the screen. This file's metadata tags your system. Timestamp matches late November 2014. It was routed through your father's business server 3 days later. I stared. The pit in my stomach widened. How many files like this? I asked. She tapped a key. A list populated 8 entries, all tied to my security profile, all submitted under different federal programs. None with my permission. I felt cold. Not angry. Just hollow. This wasn't accidental. Jasmine said, her voice tighter now. It's pattern-based. They used your clearance like a firewall, got through gates they'd otherwise be blocked from. I took a breath and pulled out my phone. The speaker button was slick under my thumb. Gregory picked up on the second ring, smooth as ever. Evelyn. What a surprise. I swallowed hard. Hey, Dad. Just cleaning up old files, trying to sort out a few things from years back. Do you remember those tax forms you had me sign in 2014? A pause measured. Oh, sure, he said, light. You always had the right classification. It helped us out a bit. Things you signed years ago made more difference than you probably realize. Jasmine hit record. And Madison? I asked. Another pause. Everyone's got to start somewhere. Some doors don't open unless you've got the right name on the paperwork. The call ended before I could feel my own pulse again. Jasmine leaned back. He just confirmed intentional use. And he's not worried. Which means he either thinks you won't fight, or he believes no one will listen. He's half right, I muttered. No one ever has. She didn't look up. That ends now. I sat back, my eyes flicking to a highlighted name in one of the old email chains, Meera Patel. It meant nothing at first, then clicked. She was the accountant who used to work for Gregory's firm. Always quiet, always had a black notebook she never let out of sight. She left suddenly in 2015. No warning, no farewell. Who's Meera? Jasmine asked, catching my focus. Someone who might know more. Or have proof. Jasmine added the name to her notes. Let's find her. I rubbed my temples, the weight of the last hour compressing into a single ugly truth. It had never been just about neglect. Not silence, not misunderstanding. I wasn't invisible, I was camouflage. A proxy. Jasmine stood and closed her laptop. Her eyes met mine with a finality I hadn't seen before. You were never just forgotten. You were used methodically. Then it's time they see me fully. The smell of old curry clung to the stairwell like a forgotten memory. I climbed to the 3rd floor of a worn brick building in downtown DC, where government rooftops cut against the sky like watchful sentinels. Meera Patel lived just beneath them, tucked into a studio cluttered with file boxes, vintage mugs, and a nervous energy that hit me the second the door creaked open. She didn't smile, just blinked behind wire-rimmed glasses and stepped aside. Meera, I said softly, taking in the controlled chaos. Thanks for meeting. She nodded once. Arms crossed, posture stiff. I don't know what you want from me. Truth, I replied, stepping past a pile of unopened mail and notebooks. She looked older than I remembered, older than she should have been. There was a fatigue in her eyes I'd only seen in mirrors. The kind that comes when you've been holding something in for far too long. I sat. Jasmine leaned against the far wall, silent for now. I remember the logs I began from 2014. The tax forms, the fellowship grants tied to my name. I didn't authorize any of it. Meera flinched barely. Gregory said it was legal, she said, voice thin. He said veterans could sponsor civilian access. That it was normal. Was it? Jasmine asked quietly. Meera shook her head, biting her lip. It didn't feel normal. but I wasn't in a position to argue. I was 2 years out of grad school. Gregory. He knew how to make things sound plausible. I leaned forward. Madison's CIA fellowship. Was that tied to my clearance A beat? Then a reluctant nod. There was a funding file 2017. Application required a pre-cleared family sponsor. I didn't know it was you until your name popped up in the digital log. She walked to a desk piled with old drives and manila envelopes. I kept some things. I don't know why. Insurance, maybe. She returned with a dusty USB drive, set it on the table like a confession. I kept this, in case they ever turned on me. Jasmine took it gently, slid it into her bag without a word. But her eyes had sharpened. We'll cross-reference it, she said. If what's on here aligns with the restricted federal databases I pulled last night, it's not just fraud, it's national security breach. Mira dropped into the chair across from me as if the weight of what she'd said finally settled into her bones. I wasn't the only one, she murmured. There were others. Quiet approvals, shadow invoices. Gregory used your clearance like a key. I thought of my time in Kandahar. The dust, the blood the day I almost bled out while my family posted graduation pictures of Madison at Yale. My mother had captioned one with "so proud of our rising star" as I was being medevaced to Ramstein. They never asked where I was, never once, and now they'd turned my identity into currency. I was deployed, I whispered, fighting a war they never acknowledged, and they were building careers on my back. Mira looked down. I'm sorry. I believed her. Maybe because she had the courage to keep that drive. Maybe because, unlike the rest of them, she looked ashamed. I stood, resolve hardening with every breath. You did the right thing today, I told her. She nodded once, then turned away. Back in the hallway, Jasmine placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. This is it, Evelyn, she said. We're building the case. Piece by piece. I exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the Capitol dome in the distance. It looked different now, less symbolic, more tangible, like a place I might actually walk into with the truth. They turned on the wrong person. They called it a formality. I called it a confession. The blinds in Jasmine's office were drawn tight, casting long shadows across the wood grain of the conference table. It was nearly 10 p.m., and the only sound was the quiet tap of keys as we built a digital paper trail, one forged from years of betrayal, misused credentials, and the kind of silence that corrodes truth from the inside out. On the table between us, Mira's USB, my deployment logs, a transcript of my call, with Gregory and Jasmine's flowchart mapping each piece into what she called a clean federal timeline. Nothing speculative, no emotion, just fact chain of custody, statute, and violation. Here, Jasmine said, pointing to a date on the spreadsheet. February 12, 2017. That's the submission date for Madison's CIA fellowship. I scanned the row, my clearance ID, my signature or something close enough to pass inspection. She would have been 20, I murmured. Still at Yale. No government background, no clearance, no agency ties, Jasmine confirmed. But Gregory had access. He slipped her through using you as a human skeleton key. It should have made me sick. Instead, it made me focused. My phone vibrated. Madison. I stared at it until Jasmine gave me a slow nod. I put it on speaker. Her voice was tight, rushed. I just wanted to talk. Look, it wasn't my idea. Okay, it was Dad's. He said it was all fine, just paperwork. I didn't even read half of it. Why are you calling now? I asked flatly. A beat of silence. I heard you're digging. That Jasmine's involved. Just, please don't ruin everything. I let the silence stretch, then quietly said too late. She rushed in. Wait, Eve. I didn't mean Dad just told me to hand it in. I didn't think Jasmine tapped her phone. Call recorded. I hung up. She's cracking, I said. She's scared, Jasmine replied. And if she's calling it, means Gregory's losing grip. I opened my old green military logbook and flipped to a page marked only with an asterisk in red ink. Operation Sunbreaker. My most classified deployment. The one that had required 3 layers of vetting, 2 of which had been exploited by someone else to grease paperwork for a daughter playing pretend spy. They never even knew what I went through, I said. But they used it, repackaged it, labeled it a family accomplishment. Jasmine slid her laptop toward me. That ends here. But once we file this, once we hit submit, everything changes. It becomes federal record. There's no going back. I know. The door buzzed. Jasmine walked to open it, revealing a tall man with a buzz cut holding a padded case under one arm. Noah, I said, stepping forward. He gave me a half smile. Been a long time, Walsh. We hugged, brief and wordless. He handed Jasmine the case. Pulled a favor, he said. This is Julian Marks, ex-NSA, now freelancing under the radar. He'll verify every digital trace we flagged. Metadata chain ID backend logs. You'll have a clean digital map. Perfect, Jasmine said. I nodded to Noah. Thanks for trusting me with this. You always kept your promises, he said. Time we return the favor. By midnight, the evidence board was color-coded. Red violations, yellow supporting witness files, blue metadata from Mira Madison's fellowship and my own logs. Jasmine labeled the folder Federal Filing Draft V1. I stared at it. This wasn't about resentment anymore. It wasn't even about them. It was about what they thought they could get away with, who they assumed I would always be. Let them come. This time I'll be waiting. They manipulated the records. But metadata never lies. Jordan's fingers danced across the keyboard with the kind of focused intensity I remembered from field analysts and blackout ops people who knew how to move fast and dig deep without making a ripple. The war room glowed blue in the dark. Screens lined the walls, blinking with rows of decrypted files, each one a thread in the web we were finally starting to untangle. Jasmine stood behind him, arms folded, lips pressed into a hard line. I sat to the side, Mira's USB drive in my hand, like it might still burn me. This thing's a gold mine, Jordan said without looking up. Encrypted, but not smartly. Whoever uploaded this used basic masking protocols sloppy. Look. He clicked open a log file. A spreadsheet scrolled past with headers like Fellowship Disbursement Request Security Waiver Proxy Auth and Ops Clearance Code ED FAR34 ORS 09. I leaned forward. ED3409, I said slowly. That's my Kandahar tag. Exactly, Jordan replied. Used as a ghost signature. Timestamps show this was uploaded from a private terminal on April 3, 2017 2:47 a.m. EST. He paused. That's not normal business hours. No, Jasmine murmured. That's cover of darkness behavior. A notification popped on her screen, Mira joining via encrypted video call. She looked nervous, hair pulled into a loose knot, glasses slightly askew. I didn't know they were still using it, she began. Gregory came to me in 2017, said the system needed a verified clearance tag to push Madison's application through faster. Said Evelyn had already agreed that it was just a tech formality. Did you believe him? Jasmine asked. I wanted to, Mira admitted. But the way he said it, like it was already done. Like it didn't matter what I thought. Jordan pulled up a document and turned the screen. You recognize this? Mira squinted, then her breath caught. That's the one. I submitted it. He handed me a printed version with Evelyn's ID scribbled in the corner. Said to scan and file it digitally. Jasmine nodded grimly. We can match that to the federal database. The tags are still active. I hadn't spoken yet. I was trying to keep my breath even. But it hit me all at once while I was off-grid in a black site in northern Syria. Half-starved and full of rage, my identity had been passed through government networks like a skeleton key. Keep going, I said. Jordan brought up another log. This one blinked with a red flag. This document was buried deep, he said. CIA referral memo classified internal routing. Authored under proxy clearance. He highlighted the line that stopped my heart. CIA internal referral, Madison Drake, via proxy, E. Drake. That's not just a favor, Jasmine said. That's a lie to the federal government. I exhaled slowly, blood surging in my ears. Jasmine turned to me. I'm contacting DOJ tonight. This crosses into national-level deception. They'll want it sealed fast. Do it. Jordan pulled back from the monitor, eyes flicking to me. You okay? I nodded. But I wasn't. I went home that night and unlisted everything. Phone. Utilities. My LinkedIn profile vanished. My address scrubbed from property records through Jasmine's private data erasure firm. They'd used me like a tool. Now I was going silent because a silent tool can also be a weapon. Jasmine's voice came through just before I reached the door. This isn't just misuse. This is national-level deception. I gave them one last chance to tell the truth. Predictably, they lied. The sun was dipping low behind the Arlington skyline, casting streaks of amber across the polished glass of the cafe's floor-to-ceiling windows. The place smelled of imported espresso and rosewood furniture, exactly the kind of expensive civility Gregory liked to weaponize. He was already there when I walked in, seated near the back where it was quiet, where whispered deals could pass as small talk. I wore plain black slacks, a fitted gray coat, and zero expression. He looked up from his cup, barely hiding the smirk. You've changed, he said, the way someone might comment on weather or haircut. I sat across from him, palms resting on the marble table. Jasmine's voice whispered faintly through the in-ear mic. I'm getting a clean feed. Stay calm. I nodded once, almost imperceptibly. I thought we should talk, I said. Gregory leaned back, relaxed. Talk or negotiate? I think we both know what's at stake. He chuckled, slow and deliberate. I do. And I think you're tired. You've always been intense, Evelyn. Always making things bigger than they are. I studied him. Years of public service had sculpted his face into one of practiced assurance. But his hands, his fingers tapped just a bit too fast against the ceramic cup. Did you ever once, I said evenly, see me as your daughter? Or was I always just a clearance profile? The smile froze. Now that's not fair. Fair isn't what this is about. He stirred his coffee without drinking. Look, I did what I had to do. The world doesn't reward martyrs. You were off chasing shadows. Your name had weight. We used it. So what? So what? I repeated softly. You mean the federal fraud? The security breaches? He raised an eyebrow. You're bluffing. Jasmine, perfect. Keep him talking. I leaned forward just a bit. You said something once. When I was 12. You told me, don't ever make noise you can't back up. So here I am. Backing it up. His jaw shifted. What do you want? An acknowledgement, I said. That you knew. That you told Madison to use my identity. That you gave Mira those documents and lied about my consent. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. Then with a dry laugh he said, that name was useful. And she never complained. Hell, she barely spoke. The silence between us went taut, sharp enough to bleed. I stood slowly, folding my coat over one arm. Thanks for the confession. He blinked. Excuse me, and I'm not paying for this coffee, I added with a small smile already turning. Jasmine's voice. We got it. That's the trigger. I was halfway to the door when I glanced back just in time to see Gregory yank his phone from his coat. Plan B, he said, voice low and urgent. She's playing dirty. Let the game begin. My name was passed around like currency. Today, I took it back. The Drake house looked unchanged, but the silence it held felt different this time, heavier, expectant. I hadn't stepped into that foyer since the barbecue, and now I stood here again, flanked by Jasmine in a tailored navy suit and a folder of consequences under her arm. We didn't ring the doorbell. Jasmine opened the door like it was hers, and I followed. Gregory's voice carried faintly from the dining room. Dinner had been prepared: white wine in crystal lemon chicken, roasted potatoes. A dinner for appearances. Madison looked up first. Her hand froze halfway to a water glass. Gregory stiffened in his chair, but Marcia looked relieved. Just for a second. Then she realized Jasmine wasn't a date or a stranger. She was counsel. Evelyn, Gregory said coolly. We weren't expecting company. That's the point, I replied, sliding into the empty seat across from Madison. Jasmine remained standing. I pulled a manila envelope from my bag and began placing copies on the table. The motion felt surgical. Federal records, Jasmine said calmly. You'll see that every one of them has two names, Madison Drake and mine, Evelyn Drake. Funny how that works. Gregory reached for a page. Jasmine slapped another copy down before him. Don't touch originals, she said, without looking at him. Madison's eyes widened as she scanned the documents: DOJ memos, security clearance, routing forms, grant authorizations with my clearance code embedded like ghost ink. Marcia pushed her chair back slightly. What? Is this? I looked at her. It's what you didn't want to see. Madison's lip trembled. I didn't know they were using it for everything. I just thought it was to get through the first gate. Dad said. Gregory cut her off. Don't say anything. Not without counsel. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice of words. I turned to Madison, voice quiet. If I didn't exist, who would you be? She couldn't answer. Her fingers clenched around the base of her wine glass. You built your whole life. I continued on mine. My deployments, my ID, my record, all of it. You stood on my name to reach the podium, and then turned around and called me invisible. Gregory slammed a fist on the table. This is a stunt. No, Jasmine said smoothly. This is notice. Marcia opened her mouth to speak but stopped herself. Her gaze flicked between me and Madison, then settled on her husband. Madison finally whispered, I didn't know it went that far. That's the first honest thing you've said, I replied. Jasmine stepped forward, pulling a sealed document from her briefcase. She placed it in front of Gregory. You'll want legal counsel by tomorrow. Cornered animals bite hardest. I was ready. The headline hit the second I unlocked my phone that morning. A bold, underhanded strike disguised as a character profile. Evelyn Drake, dishonored veteran with a grudge. I read it once, then again. Cheap phrases jumped off the screen: unstable, estranged from family, questionable service record. The photos were worse. A grainy still from a deployment in Iraq, face shadowed and exhausted, spun as proof of mental distress. A cropped image from the family barbecue, Madison glowing beside a caption that read, Future CIA officer distanced from troubled sister. The knife was obvious, and it was Gregory's. I didn't call Jasmine. She called me first. Her voice was clipped, urgent. War room. 20 minutes. Her office felt colder than usual. Digital timelines were paused mid-animation on the large monitor while a half-drunk coffee cup steamed near her laptop. This smear piece is coordinated, she said, tapping her tablet. The journalist listed no source, but it's clear. Gregory fed them. Probably a retired PR contact from his Navy days. I shrugged off my jacket. Let them talk. We stick to facts. Jasmine looked at me. This is an attempt to provoke, corner you, emotionally force you to react recklessly. He wants you unstable. I handed her the flash drive from the secure box under my sink. Then let's give him paperwork instead. She plugged it in. Inside time-stamped file histories, Mira's spreadsheets cross-referenced fund flows and most critically video of Madison admitting she'd used my name even if she didn't realize it went that far. Add this to the package, I said. Jasmine's jaw tightened. We can move now, but once this leaves our hands, it's war. I nodded. Start with DOJ. I'll handle Mira. Back at my apartment, I drafted a secure email to Mira. She replied within hours, attaching a notarized affidavit. It was short, but decisive. I confirmed Gregory Drake instructed me to alter financial documentation bearing Evelyn Drake's clearance. I did so under perceived job threat. By evening, my inbox buzzed again. A blocked number. Madison. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. Hello, I answered. Madison's voice cracked through the static. I didn't know they'd go that far. I swear I thought they'd just talk to someone. I didn't think it'd be public. They turned it into war, I said. You're still standing in the middle. Silence. Then, what should I do? I didn't answer. She hung up first. Back in Jasmine's office, the news article was now trending in military chat groups. Some of my old contacts texted support. Others asked if it was true. I laughed. Laughed hard and loud like something had finally snapped clean. If this is their defense, I said, sliding the article across Jasmine's desk, I've already won. Right then, Jasmine's phone buzzed. Her eyes scanned the notification and widened. DOJ accepted the pre-filing, she said. We're on the docket. 10 days to formal hearing. They built their empire on stolen names. I built mine on truth. The federal building stood like a monolith, gray, angular, without apology. I entered through the East Security Wing where silence had weight. Jasmine walked slightly ahead of me, a narrow binder clutched under her arm, her heels clicking against polished marble like a countdown. We passed 2 security checks, a brass DOJ seal, and finally arrived at a small conference room on the 5th floor. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Inside sat 2 representatives from the Department of Justice, one male and unreadable the other, a sharp-eyed woman who never stopped writing. This isn't the hearing, Jasmine had told me in the car. This is the precursor. But it's the pulse check. They'll decide today if it's real enough to go live. It was real. In my veins. In my stomach. In the space between each breath. The binder went down on the table with a solid thud. Jasmine flipped it open without flair. We're submitting proof of years-long misuse of federal clearance identity belonging to Evelyn Drake. The primary perpetrators include Gregory Drake and Madison Drake. The victim, Evelyn Drake, is present. No reaction from the DOJ counsel, just notepads and nods. Jasmine continued. The evidence includes financial audit trails, clearance application, metadata, digital correspondence, and a sworn affidavit from Mira Patel. The male counsel leaned forward. Ms. Patel is a cooperating witness. She is, Jasmine replied. Former accountant under Gregory Drake's company umbrella. She filed under duress. He tapped his pen. Do you have her document? Jasmine passed it over. I said nothing. I hadn't spoken since we walked into the building. The woman counsel adjusted her glasses. Explain the relationship between Ms. Drake and the subjects named. Gregory is my father, I answered evenly. And Madison? My sister. Biological. I nodded once. That was enough. They flipped pages, scanned receipts, highlighted phrases. Jasmine presented the record of clearance applications submitted under my profile. She pointed to financial reports linking my federal credentials to Madison's academic grants. Each one dated, each one clean. Then Jasmine pushed forward a final page signed yesterday. This is a revised statement from Madison Drake, she said. She acknowledges unauthorized use of her sister's identity and requests pre-trial immunity as a cooperating party. The male counsel raised an eyebrow. Convenient timing. Desperation has its rhythm, Jasmine replied. I remained still, hands folded in my lap. There was no need to emote. The pages did it for me. They finished their review without a word. Just exchanged glances. One reached for his laptop and typed something I couldn't see. After what felt like a silent century, the woman counsel closed the folder and spoke. We moved to full hearing in 5 business days. Jasmine's shoulders sank, but only slightly. She thanked them, then stood. I followed, still silent, eyes forward, spine locked in place. Outside, the sunlight was too bright. It forced me to squint. Now they'll hear me. They used my name to build a future. I used the truth to end theirs. The tribunal room smelled like dust and tension. The ceilings were too high, the air too still. A government seal gleamed at the far end of the room behind 3 judges seated at a raised bench. Rows of wooden pews held attendees in stiff jackets and tighter expressions. A photographer stood silently in the corner, his shutter clicking at intervals like a metronome of discomfort. I sat at the front table with Jasmine beside me. She tapped a pen twice on her folder, an unspoken cue. I looked straight ahead. The hearing commenced at precisely 8:00 a.m. The lead DOJ counsel, a woman in her 50s with clipped vowels and silver-rimmed glasses, leaned into her mic. This hearing concerns allegations of federal clearance, misuse, identity fraud, and financial misconduct involving Ms. Evelyn Drake. She paused, scanning the room. Gregory sat across from me, his hands folded too carefully. Madison beside him looked wilted, shoulders hunched in a blazer too stiff for her frame. Marcia hovered behind them, lips pressed, thin eyes empty. She wasn't called to speak. Jasmine stood. We call Ms. Evelyn Drake. I rose. Name, rank, years served, federal ID, that's how I began. Facts, not emotion. I described deployments, the process of holding top-secret clearance, and the repercussions of its abuse. I spoke without embellishment. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Then Jasmine submitted the documents, metadata reports, Mira's spreadsheets, audio logs. The DOJ accepted them into record. Mira was called next. She walked in nervously, adjusting her glasses. When asked if she knowingly submitted false federal forms under Evelyn's name, she swallowed and answered, yes. Under pressure from Mr. Gregory Drake. He said it was approved. It wasn't. Gregory leaned forward. Objection, she's interpreting intent. This is not a courtroom, the presiding judge snapped. This is a hearing. Let her finish. Madison flinched. The questioning turned. Ms. Madison Drake, the DOJ counsel asked, can you explain who submitted your CIA clearance background paperwork? Madison blinked. I signed what I was told to sign. It was already pre-filled. Pre-filled by whom? She hesitated. My father, she said, barely audible. Gregory tensed, jaw shifting. He interrupted. With respect, this is all a misunderstanding, errors in admin. Nobody was hurt. No harm, no foul. Jasmine stood. We'd like to play an audio recording submitted under Section 4C of evidentiary protocols. The panel nodded. A quiet click, then static. And then Gregory's voice filled the room. Just use her name. She won't fight back. Clear. Measured. Arrogant. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. The air thickened. Even the photographer stopped moving. Silence. And then Madison turned, face pale, voice cracking. You told me it was just a shortcut. They used my name to build a future. I used the truth to end theirs. Truth has no favorites. It burns friend and foe alike. The second day of the hearing began under a pale morning sun veiled behind thin clouds that refused to warm the courthouse steps. Reporters huddled behind caution tape, murmuring into microphones. There was buzz now, quiet but growing like static before a storm. Inside the room buzzed with the kind of silence only found in federal buildings where tension smothered even breath. I took my place again at the table, same posture, same expression. Jasmine sat beside me, calm and unreadable. In front of us, 3 tribunal members. To the left, the DOJ. To the right, Gregory and Madison. No Marcia today. Maybe she'd finally realized there was nothing left to pretend. I didn't look at them. The hearing resumed with precision. First came Meera Patel again. She entered with her head high this time, not like the hesitant figure from Jasmine's office weeks ago. She held a thick folder, her affidavit, and placed it carefully on the table before the tribunal. I was asked to file certain documents I did not draft, she said clearly. When I questioned Gregory Drake, he told me Evelyn had authorized them, but I never spoke to Evelyn. I didn't even have her contact number. The tribunal asked follow-ups. Meera didn't flinch. She laid out the audit trail like a blueprint, dates, emails, digital signatures. She showed the deception was structured, deliberate. Then came the Department of Justice's quiet bombshell. Your Honors, we'd like to admit a finding from the Internal Revenue Service regarding federal grant misuse linked to falsified identities. An IRS agent stepped into the room, bald, stiff, unimpressed by everything. He opened a thick report. Between 2016 and 2020, Gregory Drake authorized several funding applications under the name Evelyn Drake. These were tied to defense-adjacent projects requiring veteran credentials and active clearance. Our records indicate the real Evelyn Drake was deployed at the time and had no knowledge of these filings. The room shifted. Not in movement, but weight. I heard someone breathe sharper than they meant to. Madison. The tribunal turned to her. Ms. Madison Drake, you previously submitted testimony corroborating the use of your sister's name for background clearance. Are you now aware of any other instances where her credentials were used? She froze. Her eyes darted to Gregory. He didn't look at her. Madison licked her lips, her voice barely rising above the paper shuffle. I knew about the clearance. I didn't know about the funding. I didn't know her signature was copied. You've reviewed the 9 documents in question? Madison nodded. They're not hers. I didn't forge them, but she hesitated, voice cracking. He said it was standard. That no one would care. The tribunal leaned in. Who is he? She exhaled. My father. Gregory scoffed. Objection. This is character assassination built on misinterpretation and family politics. These documents. You are not under cross-examination, the lead counsel snapped. Gregory's mouth twitched, but he swallowed his fury. He had no legal backup today, not the kind that mattered in a federal room. His former counsel had withdrawn the night before. Jasmine had seen to that. I didn't say a word. I hadn't all day. I let the weight of evidence speak. I let the truth strip them bare. Madison began to cry, soft at first, then shaking. We didn't mean to. He said she didn't matter, she blurted. He said Evelyn had walked away from the family and that we were just borrowing opportunity. Gregory turned to her, his mask slipping. You were old enough to ask questions, he hissed. The tribunal gave a stern tap of the gavel. Order. Jasmine slid a paper forward. We have a signed statement from Meera Patel, screenshots of internal communications, Evelyn's official deployment logs proving she was abroad during the signature events, and a chain of emails showing knowledge and coordination between both respondents. The DOJ stood. We are moving to criminal referral on Gregory Drake for federal fraud. That's when the cameras clicked. Not from inside, still prohibited, but from the hallway as word filtered out. Someone would leak. Someone always did. Gregory went pale, his jaw flexed. He stared forward like a man watching the sea rise past his chin. I watched him, not with hate, not even with anger, just finality. For years he wore his power like armor, wielded our family name like a sword. And now here he was, exposed not by force but by the very system he had gamed. The tribunal called recess. Gregory stood slowly. Madison didn't. She curled into herself, face streaked with regret, mascara bleeding at the edges. Jasmine turned to me once we stepped outside the room. That was the collapse. I didn't smile, but something loosened in my chest. A weight. A scar. Something old and hollow. This wasn't revenge. This was revelation. And the fire hadn't even peaked yet. When the foundation cracks, the empire crumbles with it. The morning air outside the courthouse felt different. Not lighter. Just quieter. The protesters were gone. The cameras had thinned. There was no red carpet for disgrace. Only gray steps slicked with last night's rain and a silence that echoed louder than any scandal. Gregory Drake. My father stood center frame, wrists, cuffed eyes burning with the kind of pride only a man who'd lost everything could still cling to. For years, he played the master of optics. He knew how to pose, how to twist the frame, so the angle always flattered him. But today, there was no angle. No lens strong enough to hide the fact that the king had no kingdom left. I watched from across the street, hidden in the cluster of press fans. Jasmine stood beside me, sunglasses shielding her exhaustion. Federal holding until indictment, she murmured, reading from her phone. Bail denied. They found encrypted accounts in the Caymans. That sealed it. Gregory didn't look for me. I wasn't sure if he even could. The weight of public disgrace sat on him like chains, far heavier than steel. For once, he wasn't speaking. For once, the silence was louder than his speeches. Madison stood off to the side, her face pale, drawn tight. Her usual shine hair smile confidence had dulled under layers of disbelief. The CIA had issued an internal bulletin late last night. Her application was formally closed, flagged for fraud-adjacent involvement. There'd be no future briefings, no classified assignments. Her security privileges, if they had ever truly existed, had dissolved like morning fog. She didn't cry, not in public. That wasn't her style. But the way she gripped her phone, white-knuckled and shaking, told me everything. She wasn't angry at me. Not anymore. Just suspended in a grief she never prepared for. Marcia, my mother, shuffled behind them like a forgotten footnote. She didn't wear makeup. That in itself felt like a statement. Her gaze met mine for only a second, long enough for me to see regret, raw and unpolished. She mouthed something. Maybe sorry. Maybe why. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I left before the media turned to me. Jasmine had planned an exit route, one that didn't involve flashbulbs or microphones. We took her car, looped around the block, then headed west. Through tinted windows, I watched the skyline recede, the monuments, the rotundas, the polished lies of power. All shrinking behind us like ghosts finally released from their stage. Want to say something to the press? Jasmine asked, not looking at me. No. I shook my head. Only one sentence. Write it down for them if they ask. She waited. I just wanted my name back. She nodded. We drove in silence for hours, past the city, past the suburbs, past the nameless exit signs that could have belonged to anyone. Noah met us at the base of the mountain road, arms folded, already waiting beside the truck he'd promised me years ago if I ever needed to disappear. I stocked the fridge, he said without a smile. Gas is full. You perfect. The cabin was exactly how I remembered it. Wooden frame, iron stove, creaking floorboards that groaned like old war buddies. A place where the world couldn't reach me, or wouldn't dare try. I stood at the edge of the deck that night, looking down toward the lowlands. The wind smelled of pine and burnt air. The city lights twinkled in the distance like dying stars. I could imagine Gregory's voice years ago saying something smug about legacy, about how history remembers the winners. He always believed silence meant victory. But silence wasn't absence. Silence was observation. They always thought I was invisible. And maybe I had been. For a long time, I let them believe it. It was easier than confronting the truth that my own blood had carved me out of the frame used my reflection to build their own mirrors. I was the invisible daughter, the placeholder, the clearance, the proxy. But now the mirror had cracked, and every shard reflected who they really were. Noah sat inside by the fireplace, thumbing through an old paperback he probably didn't care about. He was the kind of man who waited without asking questions, who stood by you when everyone else sold you out. Maybe I didn't love him. Maybe I just loved that he never asked me to shrink. The kettle whistled. Jasmine's call came through moments later. Somehow the mountain signal flared to life, like it knew the message needed to break through. You've been requested to speak at the Ethics Commission next week. About integrity. Of course I had. Let them see the ghost they built their fortress on. Let them hear her voice. And this time, no one would dare speak over it. I gave them silence. They gave me war. I answered with truth. The fire outside had burned low, its embers whispering in the wind that crept through the tall pine trees surrounding the cabin. I sat with a cup of lukewarm coffee, the scent of cedar mingling with smoke and memory. The retreat was quiet, a necessary pause after the storm. My name had traveled farther in a few weeks than it had in years. But here in the woods there were no microphones, no headlines, just me. It had been Jasmine's idea. A quiet weekend, faculty, veterans, ethics symposium, low-key, nothing flashy. She said it like a proposal, but I knew it was more. A soft nudge towards something I wasn't ready to call healing. Yet I agreed, because hiding was starting to feel too much like silence again. The university hadn't changed much. Brick buildings, soft lawns, banners rippling against the July sun. I remembered walking these grounds in uniform, younger and thinner, still chasing some abstract sense of duty. Back then I thought obedience was loyalty. I know better now. I entered the lecture hall behind Jasmine. She gave a short wave to the moderator and whispered, 15 minutes, maybe some Q&A. Keep it honest, but not indicting. I smirked. You mean, don't torch the place. I mean, don't carry napalm into a seminar. We took our seats. The room was half full. Professors, law students, a few retired officers. I recognized no one, which was a gift. My scars weren't public here, just speculative. They called me up last. Evelyn Drake, former intelligence operations specialist. Advocate for integrity in federal systems. The title felt clinical, but I took the stage anyway. I didn't talk about Gregory, or Madison, or the scandal now known as the proxy dossier, which had spawned think pieces and a small congressional review. Instead, I talked about names, about how a name isn't just ink on a badge, but the story it tells and the burden it carries. There was a time I said, scanning the room, when I believed silence was strength, that if you endured quietly, people would eventually see you. I was wrong. The audience was still. A few pens scribbled. I continued slower now. My name was used without my consent. It unlocked doors, funded lies, and built careers. And for years, I let that go. I told myself I didn't care. I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't want the weight. But it turns out silence doesn't protect you. It erases you. A young man raised a hand. What changed? I didn't flinch. They called me useless. To my face. And then they asked for my signature. That's when I realized I wasn't invisible. I was convenient. There was a murmur of shifting seats. Someone near the front nodded slowly. Another voice, a woman mid-40s, marine insignia on her lapel. Would you do it again? The question landed like a stone. I met her eyes. Yes, but I wouldn't wait this long. There it was. The thing I hadn't said aloud until now. The regret not for fighting back, but for letting it go on so long. for surrendering parts of myself just to keep the peace. Afterward, I stepped off the stage to polite applause. A few faculty members approached, thanking me for my honesty. Jasmine hung back, leaning against a pillar, arms crossed and half smiling. "You didn't torch the place," she said. "I brought matches. Just didn't strike them." We walked the campus path toward the admin building. Students passed by, oblivious. It was a strange relief to walk anonymously through a place that once dismissed me. My mind flickered back to the barbecue, the paper plate, the folding chair, the condescension. The sharp contrast was laughable now. Jasmine broke the silence. "You know this could be your beginning, not just the end of something ugly." I shook my head, but gently. "It's not a beginning. It's a repair." Later that evening, back at the cabin, I sat at the makeshift desk by the window. A stack of forms waited beside my laptop, applications for support funding for combat veterans. One of them, marked in blue, was mine. I picked up the pen and stared at the name printed in bold: Evelyn Drake. That name had been copied, pasted, submitted, and forged across a decade of fraudulent schemes. I'd seen it twisted to fit narratives I never chose, but tonight it was just mine. I filled out the form, line by line. No aliases, no cover identities, no borrowed reputation. When I reached the signature line, I hesitated only for a breath. I signed. The ink bled smooth and steady. No hesitation. No ghost of Gregory's hand guiding mine. No Madison watching from behind. Evelyn Drake. Not proxy. Not placeholder. Not tool. Just me. I looked at the paper again, more out of habit than doubt. Evelyn Drake. The name rested there, no longer hollow. The ink does not tremble. No more pretending. You called me useless, but it was my name that built your world. The morning sun filtered through pine needles, glinting over the glassy surface of the lake like scattered gold. October had arrived without fanfare, painting the trees in rust and amber. The air was crisp, not cruel, and the silence no longer felt like exile. A bird called out from the edge of the dock. I sat on the steps of the cabin, coffee cooling in my hands, the scent of wood smoke still clinging to my flannel sleeves. It had been months since the hearing closed, since the last signature changed everything. The world had shifted. Not loudly, but it had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for them. Not for anyone. The envelope arrived, tucked between a newsletter and a wrinkled supply catalog. Noah brought it up the hill like it was nothing, resting it on the porch table beside the eggs and yesterday's paper. No return address, just my name, written clean, deliberate. Not the imitation I'd seen 100 times before. This wasn't another forgery. This was real. I opened it slowly, already knowing who it was from. I now understand. It read, "No apology, no details, no plea for forgiveness." Just that one sentence in Madison's handwriting. I stared at it a moment longer, then folded the page carefully. There was no anger left, no lingering ache, only clarity. Some debts collect interest, others dissolve in the flame. I rose, stepped down from the porch, and walked toward the fire pit. The ashes from last night's burn still smoldered beneath the charred logs. I knelt, placed the letter on top, struck a match. The flame caught fast. The paper curled in silence, words turning into memory. Then smoke. Then nothing. When I returned to the porch, Noah was sipping coffee, one boot resting on the rail. He didn't look at me when he asked what now. I sat beside him. I signed things, I said, letting the steam rise around my words. But only when I mean it. He smiled but said nothing. There was nothing else to say. Inside the cabin was warm with the faint smell of cedar and ink. My laptop blinked softly, an open tab from the Veterans Support Board half filled. And on the kitchen table, placed neatly, deliberately, was a folder. My name was printed on the cover. Evelyn Drake. No forged clearance. No borrowed authority. No proxy. Just me. I picked up the folder, fingers brushing the weight of real choice. No obligations, no manipulation, only what I chose to carry, what I chose to sign. And I would. I set the pen beside it. A different kind of silence settled in the room, not the kind they once used to erase me. This one belonged to me. Outside, the wind turned a page on the calendar. October fresh and open. I closed the door behind me. In the kitchen, the folder waited. Evelyn Drake. This time for me. The name they once buried became the truth they couldn't outrun. Evelyn's silence was never weakness. It was the breath before the storm. Justice came not with noise, but with undeniable clarity, stripping power from the corrupt and returning it to the wronged. Because when injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. If this story resonated with you, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below. Press 1 if you felt seen, 2 if you're still deciding.